I want you to imagine a train station. One day the train doesn't come. What do? It's not particularly urgent, but you came here for a reason. You could walk along the tracks. You know you'll get to your destination eventually. You know what ends these means are for. Or maybe you don't. Pacifist Run is a collectively developed and updated version of Dungeons & Dragons, starting with two simple alterations: no violence, and players can change the rules however they want. I played 2 rounds of this game, one with a group of more experienced rules nerds, and one with a bunch of newbies, to see if they could create the perfect liberal society from the gutted carcass of a war machine through a simple swapping of hit points for democracy. Did they achieve that goal? Well, let's look at the results. Let's look at Dungeons & Dragons as sort of a system of 3 planes. There is the fictionalized in-universe game world, where your characters live and operate. There is the Our Universe real world, where the players act. And then there are the rules and mechanics as a kind of interface between the two. This sort of algorithm of a set of game mechanics allows for more clear linkages of the cause and effect between the players and the story/game world. Well, at least if you know your way around them. It's easy to get stuck in limbo if you don't. To take an example from my second group of players, a lot of them never quite got into the rhythm of knowing exactly when they were supposed to be in or out of character.
Am I saying they're being goblin?
You're just introducing yourself.
Okay.
Knowing where in this player world versus mechanics versus game world system certain rules of the game were situated had a lot of implications for the rule changes they decided to make. Round 1 stuck squarely within that interface. One thing they explicitly said towards the beginning was that they didn't want to end up twisting the rules of physics to suit their own in-game objectives.
Change or like reality,
and then also
that will change
be very different from changing how we interact with it.
Both of the rules they made, one to define fall damage and the other to define spell outcomes with the absence of hit points, were less to help them achieve their end goal so much as to patch up the holes in the program that used to direct the game world consequences of player choices. Round 2, on the other hand, had rule changes ranging from new stats to interplayer politics to in-universe economic lore.
I've been stripped of political citizenship. Can I raise someone into voting my way?
Do you want to grant in-game characters voting power?
Far from tweaking the rules of physics to put their target within reach, they brought the game to a full conclusion by simple majority.
When goblins hold hand, Kai recipes appear. Yay or nay on Tarsies. If any, at least 3 goblins hold hands. Yay! Yeah, I'm gonna say yes.
Yeah.
Is goblins holding hands to create pie recipes a game mechanic or in-universe magic? Does it matter? Is there any difference between the two? My new crop of players felt no need to neatly place their rulings within a wider system of cause and effect between the players, game mechanics, and story world, I believe because they weren't as used to or just didn't care about the standard relationships those 3 planes usually take. Well, regardless of what you do about the twist in the track or the leak in the roof or the rift in the planar system, you still want to know the shape of it, don't you?
If we are in a post-violence world, my backstory makes less sense now.
My first round of players very quickly took to picking at what no violence meant. Even before we started rolling, they were very set on trying to hash out the details and clean up the rough edges of how the no violence rule actually worked. Details that I had, of course, deliberately left unhashed. Did its absence begin in the canon lore, or with their own decisions to follow or deny my rulings? My having ripped out the violence right from the middle of the mechanics themselves had interrupted the well-understood pattern of cause and effect moving between one of our 2 worlds.
Are we doing combat?
Are we?
That's up to you.
HP does not exist.
HP does not.
What exactly? So is
Natural causes.
technically if magic is
Yeah,
causes,
I think for the same understanding.
things still hurt you.
Yeah.
But wait a second. If
Well, I'm thinking
disease exists, natural causes do exist.
violence isn't going to be the focus of this.
While my newer players had some similar questions, or rather assumptions, regarding the meaning of no violence in the universe of the game,
I'm an elf that is a barbarian. I am here telling my story about how hard it is to be a barbarian in a time where violence is
illegal.
Well, yeah, violence is usually illegal in most forms. I mean, you're not allowed to just come into the tavern and start hitting people. We'll kick you out for that.
But usually if you're violent enough, you get away with it.
That is true. Please don't do that in my establishment.
Round 2's sticking points came more with an unfamiliarity with the more specific definitions of violence within the conventions of the game.
Can I take some Werther's original?
This feels like violence.
Can I do a check to see if this beard is real?
This feels violent.
And it tackles you again.
I thought you can't be. Oh, only we can't be violent.
So what we're going to do for this is a post-strength check.
This feels violent.
Dan can no longer participate in voting or propose new rules, stripped of political citizenship.
Violence. This is political violence. Can we say that we attended this for some of the civil rights during this game? This is the most violent game of D&D ever. We took a minority voting population and legalized violence against them after stripping those civil rights.
Well, trying to strip you of civil rights. They didn't do it successfully.
Can't you see you're fascist?
This friction of language came down to the fact that what I had clarified as violence for the purposes of removal had clear names and concepts within the D&D mechanics, names that the first group was quicker to understand the bounds of. But better understanding of the problem still left us all with a glaring question. How do you enact coercion when you don't have the usual legitimating algorithms to spit it through? One issue I had to figure out as a DM was how to actually give this game stakes and consequences. Because, I couldn't threaten my players with death anymore, so I had a neat little idea for maintaining a potential fail state.
Could we still be arrested or detained?
Yes.
This
So we
is
cannot
more...
be executed. We can be in prison forever.
I think this...
So I now had a measure to keep the game running smoothly without having to resort to any kind of actual corporal violence. I'm sorry, one second, I just need to... Oh, hey, Michel Foucault. Hey, yeah, I'm working on a project right now. I'm actually kind of busy. Oh, so incarceration is a form of violence? And there's no way to avoid such punitive measures being enacted on the body in some way? And by outsourcing punishment to black box bureaucracies and the prison system, I'm just further invisibilizing the violence, thus rendering an inherently corporally violent system an even more integral part of the society, made even more so by its obscurity? Oh, yeah, that's unfortunate. Yeah, no, I didn't think about that, actually. Okay, alright, okay, well, bye, I guess,
I would like to suggest a rule change.
For all their stumblings, my second group of players did find a very efficient way to deal with some of their problems without using quote-unquote violence.
If you're able to romance any kind of monster, if you can get the monster to fall in love with you, then they poof out of existence.
My first group didn't really have the same need to come up with new methods of force because they always had other existing tools.
And you are metal. It sounds like we should go around it.
We should just go around it.
For the most part, my Group 1 players always had non-violence existing mechanics to fall back on when they reach certain obstacles, things like stealth or negotiation. In places where they could avoid having to deal with the absence of violence mechanics by use of other means, they always took the path already trodden. And whenever they did have to make newer rules, they always tried to situate them neatly within the mechanics and lore they were familiar with.
It's like
What was a new rule?
The owl can't be grappled. What if we say that a grapple at that speed's an opportunity attack? We classify all actions of responding to someone.
I will write your vote.
Yeah.
So we're
So
something like this, where it's like if
D&D,
you
it's
save
called
a turn,
evasion.
you only get to receive half damage or
So I think this matters.
Is it like
most
the druid spell Entangle, where they're like more?
Was this
powerful
in
than
response to the bird leaving the area?
So then that's an opportunity attack.
My second round of players started the game with one rule that they had a shared level of understanding of, and that was rulemaking, which they did a lot of.
I would like to propose as a rule change, no constitution. Like you die just kind of based on feel.
I'd like to canonize Werther's originals being an actual form of currency. New stat Riz. I feel like we need to like codify that true love.
True love.
True love can give you
Gives you
advantage.
advantage.
Rule
I'll give
change,
you
rule
that.
change. If something disappears, all the contents in its stomach remain intact. How about this? If you risk something dead, it comes back to life.
Can we just make an amendment that Zan cannot participate or make amendments?
Can we make a rule abolish monogamy? Can we vote on an economic bill of rights? Can we endorse a presidential candidate?
Do we want to vote to legalize marijuana?
Yes!
But there remain, of course, many sites of understanding unwritten.
You see in the back corner of this bar, there is a very old wizard, long white beard, long blue nightcap with stars, and a long robe also
You've
blue.
seen movies.
You've seen movies.
You've played Kingdom
Yeah.
Hearts. You know what this guy
You know,
looks like.
a wizard.
In addition to knowing the rules as written of D&D itself, a smoothly run game is also based on several tacit understandings between players and the DM. I try not to railroad them, and they make an attempt to follow the plot threads I have prepared. This social contract, and transgressions of it, are exemplified in how each of my groups of players interacted with the Wizard, an NPC or non-player character who serves the sole purpose of giving the players a mission and then sending them off to go do it. Group 1 met me halfway. Everyone individually found ways to make their own personal character motivations narratively align with the cause I had handed to them.
In exchange for this recipe of apple pie, would you provide me with gold and or access to the Royal Library?
Would you say that the apple pie is legendary?
If we go on this, and we of course will, honestly, free of charge.
Whoa, free of charge!
Ask of you to share your knowledge with the masses.
And then they left him because he had served his purpose. As for my second group of players,
So, you guys gonna go do this mission?
Can you come with us?
No!
What if I give you a little kiss? Would you do this?
Yeah, I guess I'm coming with you guys. That was what you guys wanted me to do. I don't have a character sheet. I don't exist beyond this tavern, but I do now.
to bring us back to the infrastructure metaphor, if you'd never seen a train before, I could understand how you might think that you can just take a rail spike as a souvenir. Shortly after removing him from the tavern, my second group of players made an enemy of the wizard, removing their sole in-universe justification for the entire plot of the game.
I'll burn your home to the ground, wizard.
You don't know where I live.
Your home is that recipe, which
Wait,
I will
wait.
destroy if it's the last thing I do.
What? Well, I can't help you with this anymore. I think I'm opposed and potentially even hostile to you now. I'm gonna go somewhere.
With the copper wire, and I tie him up.
You very efficiently wrap up this wizard. He looks like a Pez dispenser. He's just got his head sticking out of the top of this wire column, and he's like, well, shit! You're a bad person, and I hope you never find your home.
I can't go back!
He topples over, and he rolls away.
And then just to put another nail in the coffin of any sense of direction or purpose with this second round, they left the wizard to the full force of the elements.
I don't think this is an objective for this game anymore.
Wait, Sven, what were you doing outside?
I have the wizard's hat.
Isn't the wizard in the compost pile?
Yes.
The wizard's in the... He can still teach me the juggle!
You wade into this compost pile, you're digging around, and you pull out a coil of copper wire with just the cleanest skeleton you have ever seen in the middle of it.
He composted!
Kiss it, kiss it, kiss it, kiss it.
What are we doing at the bakery anymore?
This is not the last time our heroes will question their own motivations in this game after eliminating their sole in-universe purpose for being here. Railroad? What railroad? What train? What do you mean station? This is just a building with vending machines in it. One of the biggest things I learned about in this experiment was self-enforcement. My first round of players, the ones more familiar with the game and more committed to conflict and obstacle as the purpose of it, were much less willing to tamper with easy cheats by changing the rules of things like in-game physics or external authority structures like the position of DM, and they said it shouldn't be on the table for anyone else either. I would be okay with them doing those things. I wanted them to run up against rough terrain and cheat their way through it, but they didn't, because they were committed to doing things in a right way that made sense. They wanted to earn their win. And I realized something about my relationship to the educational system. This is the first project I have ever asked for an extension on, and I blew the second and third all-nighters of my life on it. I don't say that as a point of pride, I say it as a cautionary example of neurotic self-enforcement. I get upset like a wet dog when my CPS professor says we can pick whatever font we want for our final paper. What do you mean there's no formatting guide? I spent 4 graded years learning MLA just for you to tell me I didn't need to? How am I supposed to know I've deserved anything if you don't give me a simple metric and a gold star? Give me the institutions back, or I will do something that gets me on national television. Give me the institutions back! Give me the institutions back! Give me the institutions back! In the Undercommons, Fred Moten and Stefano Harney have this whole thing about stealing from the university. Take what you want from it and take remorselessly. Abandon the idea of paying your debts back. Abandon the idea of deserving. Maybe you're not a spiteful person like that. Maybe the innate glee of breaking something isn't enough for you. Then let's try building. Moten also talks about his terms as props, as a toy box. The objective of Dungeons & Dragons isn't to win, really. It's not to kill the dragon or, non-violently persuade it. It's not to know the most about the nitty-gritty bits and pieces that make up a world running on fey rules, probability, and make-believe. And it's not to beat the DM, either by tearing up their plot threads or brute-forcing your way through their map. It's to have fun. And we did that. Maybe, at the end of things, the real apple pie was the friends we made along the way. Jokes aside, I came in looking for something cynical to say about violence and war, and, well, I found some of that. What I got was an exercise in trust. Give people the tools to tell a good story, and they will. Give people the tools to learn, and they will. And maybe their idea of a good story is composting a wizard. And maybe their idea of learning is finding an excuse to make their friends play pretend with them. Welcome to Ends and Means Junction. We've got timetables and colored lines on the wall. Follow them if you need. I know you're on a tight schedule. But this place, too, can be a destination. Stay here in this world a while. You can change it if you like. I've given you the tools to do so.